Hey leaders, in this episode of Leading Collaborative Response, I'm talking with a dynamic school leader whose journey from the East Coast to Alberta has been marked by continual growth, deep learning, and a commitment to supporting diverse student needs through collaboration.
Are you a leader who is navigating the nuances of leading collaborative response in your school or district? Are you unsure of what collaborative response is? Are you looking to understand the critical role leadership plays when establishing and refining a collaborative response approach?
Collaborative response began as a grassroots approach to focus on the needs of students through a framework of collaboration. That approach has grown to a movement that is training leadership and education.
Through the Leading Collaborative Response podcast, Kurtis and I share our own experiences of leading collaborative response and lessons learned as we continue to learn and gain insight through the experiences of working alongside others. We also have the opportunity to engage in conversations with school and divisional leaders implementing the framework in their own organizations.
We know great leaders build great teams because that is what every child deserves. Subscribe to the Leading Collaborative Response podcast and join the thousands of schools seeing success for students through intentional and focused collaborative efforts. Welcome to another episode of Leading Collaborative Response. I'm Kurtis Hewson, lead learner and co-founder of Jigsaw Learning, and I'm flying solo today as Lorna is engaging with the school. However, I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. Melissa Sperry, principal of Wetaskiwin Outreach School. Melissa began her career in Alberta teaching science at Buck Mountain Central, where she later became a vice principal and principal. Along the way, she earned a master's in school leadership and a Doctor of Education degree. She also has led at Pigeon Lake Regional School before stepping into her current role. I'm also looking forward to hearing Melissa's insights into building collaborative practices that support all learners in an outreach setting. So welcome, Melissa. So great to have you here today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, Melissa, I gave kind of the formal bio here, but love for you to be able to fill in any gaps. What's your leadership journey been to this point? And would love to hear any experiences that have had an impact on you and your leadership that you now engage in at Wetaskiwin Outreach.
For sure. So I would say my leadership kind of began when I started at Buck Mountain. I was just a science teacher. I shouldn't say just a science teacher, but I was a science teacher.
Yay to the science teacher.
Right. And then I just got interested in kind of joining different teams. So I got on board with a professional development team that we looked at kind of building what professional development looked like at Buck Mountain. And that kind of got me in leadership because then I had the opportunity to come back and talk to staff about the things that I went off to see. And then after that, I carpooled with a vice principal to that school, and I just got very excited about administration, and that kind of led my journey. I went back and did my master's, of course, that you already said, as well as my doctorate, and I've kind of ended up moving schools, went to Pigeon, and now I'm at Outreach, and so Outreach is definitely a different experience, but I'm loving it here. It's different, but it's a lot of fun too.
Awesome. Well, I had the chance to come and join your school and see the great things that you have in place. But for any of the listeners or viewers, what are some things that they would need to know about Wetaskiwin Outreach, just to give a little context, and maybe even Wetaskiwin Regional School Division as well?
So we're not a very big school division. We're kind of long and narrow. Yeah. The outreach is located right in the town of Wetaskiwin. We have about 170 students at outreach. It sounds like a lot, but because we are an outreach, we're 10 to 12 right now. And so we don't have a lot of students in the building at one time. So what that means is they mainly work from home. We do have kids that come every single day. It's very flexible scheduling here. So every kid, we develop their own schedule for them and based on their needs and what they're looking for at that time and the courses that they're looking to complete. So on a given day, we might see anywhere from 20 to 40 kids walk through our building. But again, not necessarily staying all day.
Right. So With the collaborative response work, I mean, you weren't at Wetaskiwin Outreach when this was first introduced within the division. I'd love to hear some of the initial thoughts, impressions, and then what you saw as some early wins and challenges, because you were principal at Pigeon Lake when collaborative response was first brought into the division, right?
Yes. When I started at Pigeon Link, the principal previous to me had just started with some work around PLCs.
Yeah.
So kind of took over that work in our school. Read the book Learning by Doing by Dufour and Matos. And that kind of led us on a bit of a journey of creating these PLCs to start with. And so that kind of helped us create that foundation moving into collaborative response, because we had these well-functioning PLCs where we had staff all divided up into subject groups, and then at one point it was grade groups. We switched stuff around quite a bit until we kind of found something that really fit for us.
Yeah.
So when we started collaborative response, it wasn't like we were starting something completely new. We had already been doing some of the structures. The pieces were there. Some of the conversations were already happening with SMART goals and key issues. But the collaborative response itself kind of added another team and just kind of streamlined what we were doing and made it more efficient, I think.
Well, that was one of the things when I was engaging in early conversations with key leads in the division, is they were describing the PLC foundations and again, going, oh, this is going to be fantastic because it's just going to be able to layer on top. This won't be stop doing that to start engaging in collaborative response. It just looked like the next step, the natural evolution.
Mm-hmm. And I think staff bought into that, because the biggest thing is when you hear, oh, we're going to do collaborative response, oh, something new.
Yeah,
What does that mean?
Yeah.
More work generally. But when you can actually go back and say, like, hey, we're already doing this, but it's just a different way of having that conversation, I think that it's streamlined. I don't know another word, made things more efficient, streamlined the conversation. Our conversations became more targeted, not necessarily talking about a kid, but talking about what we need to do. What's the solution?
Yeah. So I know for anyone that is engaging in this conversation with a background or an interest in outreach, we know that what it looks like in a traditional school setting, the collaborative response work, has to be thought through a little bit differently when it comes to the outreach. So I'd love for you to start off with the layers of team. And we talk about those 4 layers in collaborative response. What does that look like in the outreach setting, Melissa? And please dive into the weeds of when do these happen? Who's involved? What does it look like? Because the day I was out at your school, I was super impressed with the layering, the structures, the team meeting overview that was established in an outreach where sometimes it may be, well, we're in a different situation. So we just talk about kids different here.
Well, and we do a little bit.
We do, of course.
I'm not gonna lie, I stole a lot of what the practices that were being used at Pigeon Lake, and tried to adapt them and change them a little bit to fit the structure here. At Pigeon, we had groups like our teams. We tried to ensure, we had somebody like a school support member and a family school liaison on all the teams. Can't really do that in an outreach. Mm-hmm. So of course we kind of we started with our school support team. They hadn't been doing a whole lot here at outreach in the previous year to me coming here. It had kind of been like 2 teams meeting. And so started out, let's get the school support team underway. And so meets weekly, about 60 minutes. Our family school liaison is there, so that's like our school counselor. We have an ISW, which is an Indigenous support worker who attends that meeting. We do have a teacher as well as myself as the administrator, and I'm also the inclusion coach. Mm-hmm. And then we have a success coach. So it's a pretty big team. It's almost all our staff, but not quite, that attends that meeting. And like I say, we discuss like more of the referrals that are coming in. So a teacher will refer somebody. We have a Google Doc as a referral that will come in. It flags all the members that this referral comes in, and then we can go through and discuss. We also take referrals by word of mouth too, because sometimes it's just like, hey, the concern with this student as well. And then we go through the kids, we have a discussion, and then we kind of divvy out who's going to maybe contact the family or work with the kid or whatever the need is at that time.
Yeah. And that's, I know it probably won't do it justice to describe it, but give us a sense of how that's tracked, because the Google Sheet that you had established to capture those conversations was robust and dynamic.
Yeah, so we call it the master sheet. It is basically a Google spreadsheet with a million tabs at the bottom. So we have a tab for outreach. It's very complicated because our kids are all over the map. It's not just a class of social studies kids and a class of science like it would be in a normal school. So we have basically a whole spreadsheet of every single kid in our school that's all color coded, that indicates what courses they're in, if it's semestered, if it's year long, if they're just doing something for a quarter, how many credits they need. We have a tab that's just for our grad kids. We have tabs that are grade 10, 11, and 12, and we track all of our it would be our phone calls and conversations that we have at home, trying to encourage kids to come here, because of course a challenge at Outreach is, we call it attendance, but I'll say work completion and attendance. And I know there's more things I can't think of. We have a tab that looks at the module completion itself. So we track every single module a kid does and where they're at in each of their courses. So tons of tracking that goes on, and every single one of our teams, as well as our teachers individually, this is like the sheet we rely on. PowerSchool doesn't work really well for Outreach. It's great for looking up, student information and final grade, but it doesn't give you all the information that you need. We can't even track attendance through PowerSchool at Outreach. So we use a different Google form for that to track who's coming and going, because kids aren't here all day. And so they come and go. We might only see one kid once a month. So attendance doesn't work well that way through PowerSchool.
Well, and when I was observing your SST, it was fascinating that people would be referring to it for information, but then you were also adding notes. What are the actions? Who's doing what? So that even people who weren't in that conversation could always follow up and see what was going on.
Yeah, all of our information for all our teams. We're not a very big staff here at Outreach. There's only 4.5 teachers, and then we have a few other programs in the building that run. And so we try to make sure that we have all the information accessible to everybody at every time, so we know what's going on, because it's not like a regular school where you might not see some of the kids. Our staff see all these kids at some point in time, whether they're teaching them or not, because they'll probably end up with them for something.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's that SST team that you really looked at solidifying. What are the other layers? We'll be right back to continue this episode. Communication is essential when navigating supports for students. How often have you had a student who required intensive supports which were organized and navigated by someone other than yourself? How do you know the decisions being made and the supports being designed for that student? In WeCollab, each time a student is discussed in any meeting, a record of the decisions can be emailed directly to those involved, even if you're not part of that particular meeting. Email updates allow you to stay on top of all the supports provided to your students. Start your free trial now to experience the power of WeCollab. And now back to our conversation.
Another team that we have is our planning team. So that one meets weekly. We meet on Mondays after school for about 45 minutes to an hour max. That is a little bit different here at Outreach, compared to how we did it at Pigeon Lake. Here we discuss our kids in grades. So depending on how many kids are in the grade, so like our grade 10s and 11s have about 20 some kids each, so it's easier to get through them. So we will take 1 week, one grade, another week, another grade, and we'll go through each kid individually again, referring back to that master sheet, that crazy spreadsheet I was talking about.
Mm.
And we are basically going through each kid and kind of checking where they are at in terms of their module completion, where they're at in terms of attendance, knowing that they might not be coming in every day, but attendance for us is, are they attending to courses online? Are they actually handing stuff in? Are they ever coming into the school? Those kind of pieces. Their wellness is a piece of that too. Like, where are they at? Are they needing to speak with a counselor? And so we kind of go through and discuss each kid individually, making notes in that spreadsheet based on who they might need to, or who on the team might need to make contact with. Could be family. It could be a referral to SST. It could be, hey, I need to sit down with this kid and work through math because that's the course that they're struggling in. So there's a lot of note taking, but we've gotten it pretty efficient that we can get through 20 some kids, in 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So,
well, and this is different than the collaborative planning that you had set up at Pigeon Lake, because we often say in the collaborative planning, you're not necessarily looking at individual students, you're looking at overall, but in an outreach setting, you have to have that individual student conversation.
Yeah.
So then that's happening weekly. Then your collaborative team meetings, let's go there.
Yeah, so this year, we've been doing them on our PLC days. So we were a little late to start on that this year because it was brand new. Yeah. So I spent a ton of time going back with staff and going through what all the teams actually were and what they meant, because they hadn't done a lot of that last year. So we made this lovely little laminated sheet that comes to all our meetings. Chose a flower because it was kind of like growth, and the petals just happened to conveniently fit all of our teams on here. And so we spent a lot of time partway through the year going through what all the teams are, who would be on them, why, what that all looks like, the data that would be involved in each of the teams, and kind of solidifying the overall process.
Yeah.
And because they had done a little bit before, but they were always kind of being joined in with the high school that's across the street. And then people were really confused with what was going on. Once we did that, then started running them through an actual collaborative team meeting. So stealing a bunch of things from Pigeon Lake. Outreach had already made their continuum of supports. So we just kind of keep adding to that. And then I know it's laminated and people are like, how do you add to something that's laminated? We decided at the end of each semester, we would update it and then re-laminate it again. So that way we could bring it to each meeting. And so that comes to our meetings. And then we have, of course, I steal ideas like creating our little titles of who we are and what our roles are in the meeting. And then we're kind of running through our meetings. So those happen roughly every 6 weeks this year. Next year, we'll have to change that because we don't have as many PLC days that are scheduled into our school calendar. So I'll have to sit down with staff before the end of this year and kind of decide when we want to do that. And it'll probably end up being, an after school, because we've got it that we can do it within probably 40 minutes or so.
Yeah, okay.
And the content in those meetings for us, again, might be a little different than what we had done in other schools. So here all our staff are on the team because it's not a very big staff. And that includes, if our FSL is present, she would be there. Usually the ISW isn't, but all the teachers, admin, success coach, are all on that team. And then we kind of discuss maybe a little bit right now more broader issues just based on outreach things that are going on. I can't even think of one that happened at the last meeting right now. I've gone a blank. But one of the things I've been trying to stress with staff is to leave those issues out that we can't control, like attendance. Everybody brings up attendance and it's like, great. But unless you're driving there to pick the kids up, there's not much we can do.
The day I observed, I think one of the key issues that came up was module completion in a time manner. And so then started brainstorming, okay, what are some different things that we could do? What are people already doing with this? Mm-hmm. So anyone that's listening to the audio, Melissa had held up different artifacts at different points in time. So Melissa, I'll reach out after this if you're willing to share some of those and we can pop them in the show notes so people can see. So this is a little bit fascinating too, because sometimes you'll hear schools with smaller staff teams, whether it's an outreach or not, where you go, we've got 4.5 teachers, but we still have layers that establish, and each one has a different one because the systematic process is how we attend to everything that's going on in our building.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's then shift into the data and evidence. And really, your key data and evidence is that master sheet that has basically everything that you're tracking around for your kids.
Yeah, like we do refer to the grade books. So like when we're in our planning team meeting and our school support team, we will refer back to, of course, grade books and looking at where they're at. But module completion is a big one. Attendance does play a role, but again, we use attendance as the term, like, are they attending to their work more so than are they physically coming into the building? And yeah, so that sheet is kind of like our guide. Everybody uses it. It tracks all our phone calls. So when I make phone calls to parents and or students, because we have adult students here, then those comments go in the system to say what was a brief conversation about and kind of what did it result in.
Mm-hmm. So we talk about those three foundational components and, your layers of team, your collaborative structures and processes, your data and evidence, and you already alluded to the continuum of supports. I'm interested, how has that process looked similar, but then also different from engaging in that work at Pigeon Lake? We'll be right back to continue this episode.
When we establish continuums of support, for our school focused on established priorities, we are answering the question of what will we do when faced with questions of how to support the needs of our students. But the creation of these continuums are only the first step. Join us for the online workshop, 10 Considerations when Utilizing and Refining Your Continuums of Support, part of our Support and Collaborative Response series. In this on-demand workshop, I will share 5 ways to effectively utilize your continuum of supports within your school and 5 ways to further refine your continuums to ensure maximum impact. I'll also be sharing numerous resources, templates, and samples. Access this on-demand workshop and you'll have the ability to view and replay all or any portion of the workshop when it best fits your time. Register today to learn more about refining and utilizing your continuum of supports, an integral part of a school's collaborative response.
And now back to our conversation.
I would say the similar piece to it is in the collaborative team meeting is that we're discussing more practice. Like, what are we doing and what are the changes that we can make at outreach? I'm thinking of when you were there that, we had come up with, let's see if we can get kids on using agendas. And there's a couple other ideas that had come out of that and just different things that teachers can then go back when they're online in Google Meets and or when kids are coming to their classroom, the things that they can do. So I'd say it's really tied to practice. Those would be the things that are very similar. And I would say a lot of the pieces that are on these charts I've seen them at Pigeon and here, like it's just things that we do, right? We just do, but we don't always bring attention to it, that it's something that we're doing and that it's good practice.
Well, and that's the key, is noting what is it that we do, because sometimes we get busy and we forget what are the things we could be doing, or transition of staff and somebody comes in new to an outreach setting and might be saying, I'm not sure what I can do to support kids.
Yeah.
So I would love, Melissa, from your experience, what would you see as some of the key lessons you've learned about collaborative response in an outreach setting that would be valuable for others to know during your time there this year?
I would say that this whole process just saves us so much time. Like, we've wasted so many conversations, whether it be in a staff room, to the hallway, to the passing by, to I meet with one staff member in my office about the same thing that I'm meeting with somebody else later on about. And so I would say the huge advantage is that, you're just saving a ton of time in structuring it, that you have these meetings, I guess, if you want to
And
call them that. Are
predictable,
these,
consistent.
yeah, right. They're timely, it's consistent, the language is similar. I think that's very important.
Yeah, awesome. All right. So I would love for you to be able to finish this statement, and you can be thinking about this either from the outreach setting or the broader Wetaskiwin regional setting. As a result of collaborative response, we have seen. How would you finish that, Melissa?
I would say common language, focus on like issues versus just talking about one random kid over and over and over again. More efficient use of time in our meetings for sure.
Awesome. Okay, and then last question I have to pose out to you that we love asking people is if you could go back, and this has been about 4 or 5 years that Wetaskiwin's been engaged in a collaborative response work, what advice would you give your past self in relation to this collaborative response work? Essentially, knowing what you know now, what advice would you have given yourself 4 or 5 years ago when starting off?
Well, I don't know if I would have listened to my advice, but I would have said, hey, add one more team and it makes a difference because honestly, you think back then I would have been like, another team,
Yeah, are
so
you
much
kidding me?
more
One
time
more
being
meeting?
used, right? Exactly. But when you actually see it all laid out and when you put it into practice, it makes so much sense. It's just, yeah, I don't know. The conversations are just more succinct, I guess.
Yeah. So trust that adding one more, well, and we talk about this all the time. You're going to reduce the number of meetings by adding one more, which is essentially what you're saying. We've reduced the amount of time that we've spent spinning around things by just getting really succinct and purposeful.
Yeah, hugely. Yeah.
So, Melissa, if anyone wanted to be able to connect with you to, hear any more about the work that's happening at Outreach, or if they're struggling with seeing what the collaborative response work could look like at an outreach setting, what's the best way for someone to be able to connect with you?
They could just phone me or email me.
Okay. Well, we'll throw that email into the show notes then.
For
So,
sure.
with that, really appreciate you taking the time. I know for people listening, you may not recognize that we're recording this in May, which is incredibly busy time at school. So, yeah, really appreciative of you taking the time for this conversation and to share the great work that's happening within your school. So excited to be able to share that conversation with our listeners and viewers. Melissa's fantastic. She was doing great work at Pigeon Lake Regional High School and now bringing it into the outreach. I think it's interesting some of the key things that she shared there with us. The one, and we keep wanting to reinforce this, the idea that when we can create systems and structures, and even on a staff of 4.5 FTEs, she still has multiple layers of team. Because if you can set up the systems or structures, you're going to save so much time from, I love the example she gave of meeting with one staff about this issue and then finding out that I'm meeting with someone else about the same thing. How could we create better systems to be able to attend to that? So the time savings is highly important, but what you didn't hear in that conversation is how efficiently she also runs those meetings. Being able to be really precise. Here's the agenda. Here's our next step. And then even in the small setting, not forgetting to, okay, let's review our norms quickly. Let's start with celebrations, and then let's get to the next part of our agenda. So really sticking to the key elements is incredibly important. And it doesn't matter what setting you're in, those structures can lead to such efficiencies and focus and productivity. So that was great to hear. I also loved the idea of recognizing that in an outreach, yes, we have to have more student-focused conversations, especially during the collaborative planning, than we might in another school. But the tracking mechanisms are also critically important of how do we ensure that conversations are being captured and that we are really getting efficient at recognizing what is it that we're doing to support students, where could we replicate it, where are gaps that we could be addressing for ourselves as well. She also noted, and I think this is a bigger understanding for us, is take time to go slow and determine which is the most critical part to be able to focus on. So for instance, her saying, we spent time early on really getting that school support team layer solidified, getting that structured and efficient for us, and then moving on to the next step. This is why those 4 layers of team are important, but recognizing we might not be focusing on all of them at once. We may be looking at, okay, we're going to refine this one part of our process at this point, and then move on to another in time. So really encourage you to check out the show notes, some of the resources and artifacts that we'll share there. And as always, reach out if there's questions, comments, or anything else that you'd be willing to share to support the collaborative response work, ensuring, again, that through our team processes, we're impacting each and every student that are in our care. With that, wishing you all the best, and I know Lorna would want to say, see you soon.
For more on collaborative response, visit jigsawlearning.ca or join the JL Insider to receive access to newly added resources and content. Make sure to follow us on social media. Subscribe to the podcast and the Jigsaw Learning YouTube channel to access past and upcoming episodes. Join us again to continue to build your own capacity and leading collaborative response in your context.